We often discuss consent in regards to minors becoming adults and therefore are able to get funky. Although if you look at it, the laws of England are actually based on when a person could go off and work, not necessarily when a person would become an adult, because the age of consent in the UK is 16, whereas the age of legal adulthood is 18. Go figure. Remember kids, in the United Kingdom at the age of 16 you can legally potentially start a life, but you can't buy a funky adult toy because they're for over 18s, as is consuming alcohol. What are these laws? Baffling legal logistics behind the ages of which a person can do something that causes me mental gymnastics aside, the ages between 16 to 18 is where most countries across the world mark this legality with complementary social conventions such as Sweet 16s. Sweet 16s in the United Kingdom aren't really a big thing. I don't know anybody who had a Sweet 16 in particular. I mean, there were birthday parties, but it wasn't like, yes, you're 16. And I think the difference is that in some states in the US, you can start to learn to drive when you're 16, which is a milestone, whereas it's 17 in the UK. So if we were to put a massive emphasis on the age of 16 based on what a person can do at 16, in the US it's happy birthday honey, here's your first car, whereas in the United Kingdom it would be happy birthday honey, you can finally get done up the... Should I leave that joke in there? I think I'm going to leave that joke in there because stuff is about to get pretty dark. All of these events take place to highlight the milestone a young person has reached, their progressive development that changes their position within a given society or opens up previously age-restricted activities, such as drinking and funky stuff. But what we don't talk about as nearly as much is when development starts to regress with things such as degenerative brain diseases, and how this places many adults who have gone through the aforementioned milestones back in a vulnerable place, and some intend to exploit this. It's important to note that while two individuals may be adults in extremely large age gap relationships wherein one may be 70 plus, consent isn't straightforward. Around this age, many will begin to exhibit symptoms of neurological deterioration, for example, forgetfulness or confusion. If symptoms progress, they may be diagnosed with one or more neurological diseases such as Alzheimer's, which can have an onset as early as the early 60s. While I will be talking about some dementia-based illnesses such as Alzheimer's, I actually already have a video on Alzheimer's and dementia as a whole that goes into a lot more detail. These are vulnerable human beings who do not have much capacity, if any, depending on the stage they're in, meaning they have an inability to consent to many things, which can include anything from consenting to take a shower, to be changed into clean clothing, or indeed, the funky stuff. Approximately 1/3 of UK elderly people are engaged in funky activity. Doing the funky isn't something that goes away with age, nor do funky urges. But the issue here is that limited capacity hinders a person's understanding of what they are consenting to, even if they are experiencing these completely normal funky urges. The issue herein arises to, does the person understand what they are consenting to, and does the person understand what the other person wants to do and the extent of what they want to do? For example, a person with diseases like these may want to consent to a kiss, but the second person may want to go further and do the funky. However, the former doesn't have the capacity to understand what's going on, and this constitutes a very hard issue of consent. Some people with these diseases are non-verbal or have unintelligible speech and cannot properly express what they are consenting to. Others may not understand what the other person wants, even if they are perfectly articulate. And this is an issue when it comes to processing information that they have. There is an abnormality where they might not be able to properly receive and understand verbal confirmation or body language indicators. I now want to talk about two different cases which involved a person of sound mind manipulating somebody with one or more of these diseases into doing what they want them to do, despite the person with the diseases being a vulnerable human being. A teen bride in the United States has been slammed after she allegedly bragged about marrying a 90-year-old dementia patient. The 19-year-old, who has since deleted her social media accounts, is accused of excitedly tweeting that she would be a widow by the time she's 30. If we get married, I would be the sole person who gets his inheritance. One screenshot allegedly shows the woman saying to a friend in a Twitter message. Hell yes, one day closer to being widowed before 30. Another tweet from the teen allegedly said. In other screenshots, the teen allegedly brags about her husband's step-grandson being older than her, while saying she is genuinely happy in the relationship. In most cases, you would think that the 19-year-old girl is the victim in the situation, but absolutely not. She is the abuser. He used to be a superintendent in Memphis, and I think when we woke him up, suddenly he went back to that because he thinks Rosalind is his teacher and he thinks I'm a student, and he's giving us a speech about needing to get the work done. This man has no concept of reality or time or place. He has dementia. If you would like to know who this abhorrent excuse for a human being is, her name is Olivia C. Stone, and I hope that she never gets a job in care around vulnerable human beings ever again, because yes, she was his carer. His name was Lee R. Hopkins, a man with dementia who had absolutely no ability to consent in any way, shape or form, and she manipulated him. I would like to ask the question to the other carers on staff at the time, because in the United Kingdom, in many different care homes, in order for a person with dementia to go out into the community and visit people and go to places, those managing the home have to be damn sure that person is going out and they're going to be safe and not go to a wedding in which they are being manipulated to marry one of the aides there. Like, normally, it's a family member who takes them out, and that's absolutely fine. But if a carer takes a resident out, it's mostly because they're going to go and assist them to attend a medical appointment. Did no one check anything? Did this girl not have any of her co-workers on Twitter? How did this happen? And here's a not safe for work tweet indicating that she had funky times with him, which, may I remind people, would have been non-consensual on his end. Oh, and United Kingdom, you don't get out of this as well, because family of an OAP 91 with dementia who was secretly wed to a younger man demand action on inheritance hunters. The family of a 91-year-old with dementia who was secretly married to a younger man say urgent action is needed to prevent vulnerable people being exploited. Daphne Franks approached an MP claiming a man had married her mother, Joan Blass, who had late-stage dementia without the knowledge of the family. A legal loophole meant the marriage resulted in the previous will being automatically revoked, so when Joan Blass died only a few months after the marriage, at the age of 91, all her inheritance and possessions written in her will for her family went to her new husband. Coleman Fullen, a picture on screen now, is the man who decided to manipulate this vulnerable and ill human being into forking out all of her inheritance and possessions to him. 20 years her senior, and he doesn't have any Alzheimer's or dementia. He knew what he was doing. He met her and then moved into her house within a month, which is definitely something an undesirable would do. In a previous statement, he said, Mrs. Blass wanted to marry me, and I believed at the time, and still do, that she has the capacity to make that decision for herself. Meanwhile, her family claim she couldn't even remember his name or her own date of birth at times. Olivia and Coleman are two human beings who are sick and twisted and so obsessed with themselves and have such a greed that they would take a human being who has troubles distinguishing what's real and what's not, who is who, and even their own date of birth, and manipulating them and playing on their mental problems and their neurological problems to benefit themselves. Olivia was a 19-year-old girl, but an adult. She knows better. She knows that a man that mistakes her for a student and doesn't know what's going on half the time isn't going to consent to marrying her. Coleman knows that the woman who struggled to remember her own date of birth isn't going to be able to have capacity to marry him. And I hope laws come in place in both the United States and the United Kingdom that can stop this happening, because these are vulnerable people. It doesn't matter that the people who manipulated them were younger than them. Even in Olivia's case, both had full capacity, whereas the older person did not. It is completely justified and right that 10-year-olds, for example, cannot do this in most places in the world. These people have the capacity of 10-year-olds sometimes. They should be protected too. I hope this video was informative. I got a bit angry there, but I still am really passionate about these kinds of things, and I hope something can change. I'll see you guys soon.